Well, we're about to get started. Maybe this class will help, Anshia.
I think so.
Okay. Great. We're going to jump into it. Good evening, everybody. I guess the question I want to start with is, if I were to ask you what blessings are inherent just in a single day, what would you say? Is there something, an objective blessing that happens when a new day starts? Can you point to something in each new day and say, this is a blessing? With that, I want to bring our attention to the first line of our Torah portion, which is this. And I say our Torah portion, I mean the one that we just read over Shabbat. It says, Re'ei anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. See, I put before you today a blessing and a curse. Here, I'll read the entire verse just so we can get a taste of it. By the way, if you have a Tanakh in front of you, we're right at the beginning of Parshat Re'eh, which was chapter 11, verse 26. So it says, Behold, I put before you today a blessing and a curse. Et habracha asher tishma'u el mitzvotai, Hashem Elohechem asher anochi mitzaveh etchem hayom, v'haklala im lo tishma'u el mitzvot Hashem Elohechem, v'sartem min haderech, asher anochi mitzaveh etchem hayom, v'lechet acharei Elohim acherim asher lo yadatem. So it says, see, I put before you today a blessing and a curse. Blessing if you obey the commandments, and a curse if you don't obey. That's how the Parsha starts. And of course, the goal is to choose the blessing. But there's a question that our rabbis point out, which is to say, what is the deal with the word hayom? I put before you hayom, today, a blessing and a curse. Which day? Today? When Moses was talking today? What is that word doing there? And so tonight we're going to look at, of course, the Kedushat Levi. He's our guy. That's who we've been spending a lot of time with. We're going to look at his commentary on this. He says, and we're going to read three different ideas about what this word today implies. He says, Lich'ora tevet hayom eino muvan. He says, this word today doesn't exactly make sense. Ach diadua shehakadosh baruch hu mechadei betuvo b'chol yom tamid maseh bereshit. He says, look, it's known. God every day recreates in God's goodness the works of creation. This is an idea that every day is new. It's not just that creation happened once, but that every day creation occurs as an ongoing process. And by the way, that's how we experience the world too. You know, we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. In our linear experience, it feels almost like it has not been created yet. And so the Kedushat Levi hones in on that idea and says, actually, that is the reality of things. It feels like that because actually it hasn't been created yet. And the process of creation is occurring still. Dehu yitzbarach, that God, noten b'chol yom behirut chada, u'mashpia chasadim chadashim, that God every day brings new clarity and pours out all kinds of new wonderful things. B'ha'am ha'obed shmo yitzbarach, mekabel alav b'kol yom behirut v'sechel chada. And each person, when they serve God, acquires for themselves new pieces of clarity and new pieces of knowledge every single day. Mashalo haya yadua etzmo, things which were not known yesterday. Al derech she'amru chochmeinu zichronam livracha. And in this manner, our rabbi said, Hayom, b'chol yom yu be'enecha kachadashim, that we should view ourselves every day as if we are new creatures, as if we are renewed every single day. Ratzal Omar, this is to say, b'chol yom tekabel bracha v'chesed mechadash. Every day, you should acquire, or you will acquire, a blessing and new pieces of goodness. So this is the first comment that the Kedusha Levi has, the power of today. What is the today doing there? The today comes to imply the new pieces of clarity and wisdom that we seek every day. That not that we seek, that we experience every day. And what I love about this is it doesn't have to be good or bad. Every single day we learn something new about ourselves, something new about the world, a new insight, into a relationship, a new insight into maybe what we like, what we don't like. But we're always learning and we're growing intellectually and emotionally. And he says just that in and of itself is a blessing. Hold on to that. The fact that we keep growing and we keep learning and we keep on feeling, and that we're different today than we were yesterday. And that in itself is a blessing, and we can choose to appreciate that, or we can choose to ignore it. When we appreciate it, then we're doing the service of God. We are admitting that things change, that God creates the world anew every day, and we're thankful to be part of that consistent work of creation, that we ourselves are new because we're constantly growing. We're not the same as we were yesterday. We won't be the same tonight as we will tomorrow night. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? Who knows the kind of people you're going to talk to, what you're going to read, what you're going to feel. Everything about who you are now is going to be built upon and will be different tomorrow. And to what extent will we appreciate that? That's the first thing. That is the first blessing that today holds. It doesn't have to be good or bad, but just an appreciation of, our process of becoming, the fact that we continue to grow and change, and that there is always within us, not only the possibility, but the promise that we're going to continue to grow and change intellectually and emotionally. That's the first blessing. We'll go to his second comment now. It says, O yesh lomar, or we could say, She hamafarshim dikduku al halashon asher tishma'u, shehaya lo lomar im tishma'u, kamo gabe im lo tishma'u. So he makes a very particular grammatical point. We translated this by saying, I put before you today a blessing and a curse. If you choose the blessing, it's doing the mitzvot. If you don't choose the blessing, it's not doing the mitzvot, and there will be consequences. But in the Hebrew, that conditional, that if you do this, if you don't do this, only exists for the curses. If you choose to curse over blessing, then you have the word im, which means if. When it comes to the blessings, there's no conditional. We translate it because it doesn't translate well to English, but there's a word asher tishma'u. It's not if you listen to the mitzvot, it's I put before you a blessing, those which you listen to the mitzvot. It's not conditional. So he asks, what's the deal with the fact that there's no im? What is this asher, which comes to kind of define what the blessing is, rather than make it into a conditional? Explaining the point, but now we'll get into his drash on it, which is more important for our purposes. He says, Kamot gabe im lo tishma. He says, V'nireh, diyadua Divrei Chazal, he says, our rabbi said in the Talmud, Dischar mitzvah b'hai amaleka. There is no reward for a mitzvah in this world. That is to say, when you go out and you do a mitzvah, when you shake a lulav, if you put on tefillin, if you keep Shabbat, you can't expect any reward whatsoever in this world. Aval, however, he says, yesh schar echad. There's one reward, which is mentioned in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of our ancestors, and it says, mitzvah goreret mitzvah. A mitzvah brings about another mitzvah. And so he says, Dehus char mitzvah. This is the reward of a mitzvah, is another mitzvah. When you do a mitzvah, the reward, you don't receive any reward in this world except a mitzvah itself. And so Ratzel Amar, he says what this means is this char shal mitzvah, the reward of a mitzvah, hu ha mitzvah gufa sha'asa. It is the mitzvah itself that one performed. The ein sarich yoter schar. And one doesn't need, he says, any reward beyond this. Rak zeh gufa shezoche la'asot mitzvah ba'asa ta'anug lahaborei. He says, rather the mitzvah itself is the reward, because one has merited through doing that mitzvah to bring joy to one's creator. To put it in other terms, the reward for a mitzvah, he's saying, is that relationship with God. And that is all we can expect with a mitzvah. Don't expect riches. Don't expect, to, find, whatever kind of, worldly reward. But he says the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. And it's to have, forged that loving relationship with our Creator, with the divine, from that, bigger thing that we call God, from which we came. He says, by the way, he says, Ein lecha sachar yoter mizeh. There is no other reward greater than this. We've talked a lot about devekut, about the Hasidic goal of really clinging to God, and that is, the whole goal of the Jew's existence, in the, Hasidic milieu. It's to cling to God. And so he says, that is the reward here. And further, it's the greatest reward that we could hope for. V'zeh she'amar hapasuk. And this is why the verse said, Re'ei anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha. I put before you today a blessing. Ratzah lomar, this is to say, afilu ba'odchem chayim, kasheta'asu mitzvot haborei, tekablu bracha b'zeh ha'olam. That even while you're alive in this world, when you do a mitzvah, you will acquire the blessing, a blessing in this world. That's the second reason he says today. What is the today? In that verse, he says it's a promise that there's one reward for a mitzvah, and that's that today, this very day, you're going to bring joy to God. That is to say, you are going to forge that connection with God. Etz habracha asher tishma'u. He says that part of the sentence, the blessing which, if you listen to the mitzvot, ze gufa ma she'atem tishma'u li b'ta'asu mitzvotai. This refers to specifically when you listen to me, to God, and you do God's commandments. Ze gufa yeh habracha, and this is the essence of the blessing. Ki ein ta'anu gadol yoter mizeh. Because there's no joy that one can have greater than this. Schar mitzvah, mitzvah. The reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. And that's not the case with the curses, he says, which is why the language is different. With the curses, it's conditional. If you don't do this, then there will be repercussions. But with the blessing, it's not conditional because we don't expect a reward. But the reward itself is the mitzvah in forging that connection with God. And when that happens, it happens immediately. When you do a mitzvah, that relationship with God grows, and in his mind, you bring joy to God. So that's the second piece of Hayom. What is the today doing in this verse? It's to say that today you do receive a blessing. Even though our rabbis say there's no reward for a blessing in this world, there's one exception, which is the blessing of the mitzvah itself and having forged that relationship with your Creator. So that's the Kedushat Levi's second Hayom. The first one, if you remember, was an appreciation of the blessing that we continue to learn and grow every day and that we're different. That's the Hayom, because every day is different. I put before you a blessing today. The second today was when you do a mitzvah, when you keep God's commandments, then you forge that relationship with God today, right at that moment. And here's the third, what he does with the word today. He says, O Yomar, or perhaps we'll say, this verse, Re'ei anochi noten lifnechem, hayom bracha uklala, behold, I put before you today a blessing and a curse. Tevet hayom yuduyak, he says the word today is specific. Perush, hayom matchil habracha. Today, the blessing begins. Af al pi shehabrachot ne'amru al har grizim v'hal eval, even though Moses commanded the Israelites in the desert to go and say all the blessings and curses on these two mountaintops in the land of Israel. Mikol makom matchilim hayom. Still, even though they weren't in the land of Israel yet, Moses was teaching them that the blessing starts today. Umifaresh, and it's explained like this: Etz habracha asher tishma'u el mitzvotai. The blessing which, if you keep my commandments, as we explained above, shezehu gufa habracha. This, as we explained above, is the blessing in doing one of God's mitzvot. Me'ata im hayom bekoli tishma'u yeh bracha hayom. That is to say, from now, from this very moment, if today you listen to God's voice and you do God's mitzvot, then there'll be the blessing today. Kevan shezeu hu habracha b'meshatem shomei b'mitzvotav. And that's the blessing that you get from doing the commandments. So he goes, for the third comment, a different direction, and says that the focus of today is not only a promise, but an opportunity to say that you have the potential right now to reach out and take this blessing. Every single moment. Even you don't need to wait. If you're waiting for the right time to reach out to God, to pray, to have a moment of, hitbodedut, in the Hasidic, world, that's like a, heartfelt conversation with God that you can have at any point. If you're waiting for the right time, you got it. It's right here. Don't wait any longer. The today here is to remind us that the blessing that we have in front of us, we can reach out and grab. Specifically, what he's talking about is the blessing of being able to connect with God, or at least to reach out to that bigger picture. But I want to kind of maybe expand it a little bit more, beyond, our relationship with God. There's that idea that we have before all of us a blessing and a curse. There's good things that happen in a day. There's bad things that happen in a day. It's so easy to be distracted by those things which, we all know those things that distract us. That email that didn't quite go right, the conversation that you're second guessing, something you said, something somebody said to you, something you're worried about. These are things which we all worry about and which distract us terribly. On the other hand, there's blessings inherent in every day too. The Kedusha Levi started with one. The blessing that we do grow and change. That is a blessing. We have a blessing every day that we get to sleep in our own bed. That's a blessing. Every day that we're with somebody who we love, or that we can talk to somebody who we love, that's a blessing. And these blessings are so easily looked over. In the Torah itself, the promises for keeping the commandments are, wonderful, and the blessings are written out actually, but they're very short. And there's whole chapters of curses if you don't keep the blessing. And my favorite understanding of that is, as humans, we hone in on that which is bad so easily. And so every day, every moment, the Kedusha Levi would say, you have in front of you an opportunity. And that's what today means. That's the promise of today. Today, this very moment, in front of you are blessings and curses. Which one are you, this very moment, going to reach out and take hold of? That's the question he's asking us. So there you go, 3 different ideas about what today means in that verse, what it means that there's a blessing and curse in front of you today. We'll review the 3. The first is the Kedusha Levi says that word today means, it's to remind us that we are recreated every day. We grow and we learn, and that itself is a blessing. The second is to teach us that when we do any mitzvah, there's a reward that we get today, the very moment you do that mitzvah, and that is forging your relationship with God. And the third is to see that word as an opportunity, which is to say, today, this very moment, you have in front of you a blessing and a curse. This moment and every moment. And which one are you going to grab? Which one are you going to put your attention toward? So with that, I'll open it up for questions. If there's anybody on YouTube or and Shea and my mom on Zoom, if you have any questions too, you're welcome to ask. I'll hold on for a moment to see if there's any questions, and then if not, we'll sign off.
Will you say what that first one is again?
The first one. Today, yes, I'll say what the first one is again. And Yocheb, I'm going to put your comment into Google Translate also. Hold on. Today, choice of Hashem is close, and it is to him. So, yes, to repeat the first one, it is that today, the word today in the verse, is to teach us that every day is a new work of creation, and specifically that we should see ourselves as new creatures every day. That is to say, we learn and we grow one day to the next. And that in itself is a blessing which we can focus on. Whether or not, things are happening to us that, we find agreeable, pleasurable, disagreeable, whether things are happening good or bad. That is, a promise of just being a human, that we do grow and change. And he says that itself is a blessing. And that's one of the meanings of today. And Yocheb, reading your comment, you said in Portuguese, it says, today choices can be made. God is close, and it's to God that we must run. Yeah, God gives us calm and blesses us. Yeah, I would agree. I think what the Kedusha Levi would agree with you here, saying that God is close. That is to say, there's the possibility of forging this relationship right now, as if God is right here in front of us. Thank you, Yocheb. Okay, everybody, with that, where I think we're going to sign off for today. If you're a Sinai Temple member, I want to remind you that the clergy, we're all teaching about High Holiday Liturgy week to week. This week is Unatana Tokef week, and you can join me tomorrow night when we will learn about that prayer. But for now, we'll sign off. Shavua Tov, everybody. Shavua Tov and Shia on Zoom. Okay, see you next time. Bye, Yochev. See you later. Okay. And Shia, I'm glad.